Hello everyone, I'm Pastor Dylan and welcome to the Dayspring Wesleyan Church podcast. The best way to stay connected to the life of the church is downloading our app. Simply go to the App Store, search for Church Center, and download the app and enter the information for our church. This will connect you to our church community. I pray the following presentation will inspire you to come closer to God in this journey of faith. Enjoy listening.
So have your Bibles today with you. Turn to Numbers chapter 27. We're going to be looking at verses 12 through 23. Growing up, I don't know about you, but I love playing games. The games that, I think all types of games are great for me, but I didn't really like board games as much as I liked card games. I was more of a card game person. There are certain board games I like, and I do like things like, there's a Ticket to Ride game that I like. There is, I used to play Life back in the day, and then I like Mad Gab because it's trying to remember the words and stuff, but I'm really more of a card person. And I think one of the reasons I don't like the board games is because growing up, like you'd be playing Monopoly and you'd have the money set up, you'd have the hotels and the mansions and those type of things and your little figures. And then, man, it seemed like every time one of us would get ticked off. And when we got ticked off, we did what? We threw that board, money went everywhere. I was like, oh, there goes my mansion, and, try to grab it and stuff. But you would lose all these pieces, and everybody would be ticked off, and, you might get hit by something. And card games I like a little bit more, because if you get mad, the worst you can do is throw a card at me, so it doesn't hurt as much, all right? But the one card game that we've started playing in the last, I think since I've been married to my wife, they started playing a game called Up and Down the River. And here's the basics of the game. It's kind of like the base of the games are aces are definitely high, but you also have trump. And the way you determine trump is you have the stack of cards, and whatever you turn over is trump. And so follow this with me, okay? The first round, you get one card, okay? Round two, you get two cards. Who said three? Somebody said three, okay. Then round three, you get three cards. You guys are getting it. I got it, okay? Some of you are having trouble following along, all right? So by the end, you work your way all the way up, and then once you get all the way up, then you go all the way down. And when you go all the way down back to one, I love this part because you just stick the card on your head, and you can see everybody else's card but your own. And here's what you have to do. You have to bid how many tricks that you can get, okay? So when you only have one card, the most you can bid is one, and the other option you have is 0. Okay, so those are your two bids. Now again, when you get to 2, you can go either 2, 1, or 0. So by the time you get up to some of the larger numbers like 9, it becomes a little bit more difficult because you're trying to figure out how many tricks you can get. And if you don't get it exactly right, you lose either way. So if you go too high, you lose. If you go too low, you lose. So if you bid, like let's say you're in a hand of 9 and you bid 0 because you don't think you're going to take any tricks, and then something happens, and for some reason, your dumb card, you take the first trick. And then, man, some people get ticked. Some people are okay. But you have some options now, right? You can either play nice, or you can play like Chuck. All right? Okay? And what Chuck is like, okay, you guys messed me over. Now I'm messing everybody over, So now I'm playing crazy things to mess everybody else up because I don't want them to get any points, right? And even though that's a game, life is not a game. And what I found in life is that there are times when things don't go our way where we have an opportunity to either continue to do the right thing or we can sabotage those around us. So what I mean by that, you'll see this you'll see this at work sometimes. Something doesn't go an employee's way, and they'll start to sabotage the company. You can see that with spouses sometimes, the husband and the wife, they don't get their way, and so they'll begin to sabotage the relationship. You can see this with your kids, where things aren't going their way, so they try to make either things difficult for you, or you try to make things difficult for them. And I have to admit, I've actually seen pastors who did not get their way who will sabotage the church. Because it's almost like, well, if they can't succeed with me there, then I don't want them to succeed with me not there. And I think that's just a sad place. And so in our studies, as we're continuing to talk about the Israelites wandering in the wilderness, I want us today to sit with Moses for a moment. Because I really believe this. Moses is coming to the end of his time. He has been leading the Israelites for this long span. And he has every right to be ticked. He has every right to be bitter. And he has every right to sort of sabotage the rest of the group. But when you and I sit with Moses today, I want you to watch how he responds. Because I think there's some really good points for you and I to watch in leadership as well. So let's read through 12. Probably not going to read through the whole part of this because I want to save a little bit of time. We are going to read through that whole section, but just let me read this beginning part. It says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Go up to the mountain and Abiram range and see the land I have given the Israelites. After you have seen it, you too will be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was. For when the community rebelled at the waters in the desert of Zin, both of you disobeyed my command to honor me as holy before their eyes. These were in the waters of Meribah, Kadesh, in the desert of Zin. Moses said to the Lord, May the Lord the God who gives breath to all living things appoint someone over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. Let's pray together. Father, I love the truth that is in this passage, and I love how you give us these men and women in the scriptures who did and went through difficult times, went through joyous times. And we get to see how they responded in the darkest of times and in the lightest of times. Father, I pray that we would recognize the benefit of being obedient to you and following your ways, and learn that even in some crazy and tough situations, even when things don't go our way, how we might respond differently. Father, I pray that as we get in your word today, if there's anything that I would get wrong in the interpretation, I pray that the people would only hear what you have to say to them. In your name we pray. Amen. So, again, I want us to sit with Moses again. And you have to remember the leadership role of Moses. Moses was called by God at a burning bush, you remember. God had this intimate conversation with him. And he said to him, he's like, look, I want you to deliver the people of Israel out of slavery. And he says, I want to use you. And he's like, I don't talk well. Can you send my brother Aaron with me? He's like, okay, Aaron can do the talking, but I need you to lead the people. So we read that in the scriptures, Moses goes out. He leads the people of Israel out of the Egyptian slavery. And then he says this, I want you to continue to walk with me, and I'm going to lead the people to the promised land. Which you and I remember, they're coming up to the promised land, but they want to check and see how things are going. So they send 12 spies out. Remember, 10 come back, and 10 say, man, we can't do this. Everything that God said is true, but the people are too big and too powerful. And you got two, Caleb and Joshua said, we can easily do this because we have the help of God, so let's go in and do this. And again, the people, they decide not to. God's angry with them, and he says, okay, for each of the 40 days that you got to look at the land, he says, for each of those days, you get 1 year of wandering in the wilderness. So they end up with 40 years wandering in the wilderness. And so Moses had to put up with their crying, with their bickering, with their complaining, all while trying to walk with the Lord and lead them to the promised land. He had to put up with all that. And so Moses is in a place of leadership. And we know that Moses, you think that he has this total respect of the people because, again, they saw the plagues that happened. They saw what Moses spoke for God. They saw him take the staff and put it in the Red Sea. They saw it parted. So you would have thought that they would have just been high on Moses. But honestly, there were times when they didn't care for Moses. I mean, they would even call out to him and says, who are you to send us out here? And they also would say, and who gave you leadership? We didn't ask you to fill this position. And so they would challenge him at times in that as well. But Moses continued to stay faithful. The issue then is what we have now in verse 12. And it says this, Then the Lord said to Moses, Go up this mountain and in the Abiram range and see the land I have given the Israelites. Now this is pretty cool what's happening because God has brought Moses now to the place of the promised land. He tells him to go up on this mountain. And he says, I want you to look and see the promised land. This is the land I have promised you. And this is the first thing that I notice about a leader. If you have a good leader, one of the things you'll notice is that they always have a goal in mind. All right. And Moses knew the goal because God had told him, you're going to walk with me. You're going to lead the people out of slavery. And then you're going to bring them to the promised land. Initially it was into, but now it's just, you're going to bring them to the promised land, which we'll get to in a minute. So he brings them all the way, and now God says, now stand up on this hill and see this goal that I have put before you. And I want to ask you the question, because I think it's something that all of us need to wrestle with. But I really believe that God has put all of us in a place of leadership in one way or another. And what I want to ask you this is, in being a leader, what is your goal? Like, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to get done? What are you working towards? So if your goal becomes loving my kids, then I would encourage you to love your kids. I would encourage you to be there for them. You need to make sure that you don't spend so much time at work that they don't feel like that they're being taken care of. You need to understand that if you want to love your kids, when you get home, you need to spend time with your kids. You can't say, I'm tired, I'm busy, I can't do this. Like, you need to separate that time and be there for them. If they have an event, you need to be at the event. You need to create a space where they feel comfortable enough to come to you and tell you what's going on in their life. If your goal is to love your wife, then love your wife. And I mean just not only love your spouse or love your wife, but I mean fight for that person. Find out what makes them tick. Find out what do they like. Find out their interests. And then begin to do things or encourage them in those things. Be supportive of them, listening to them, caring for them, telling them that they are loved, setting aside time for them, because that becomes important to you. If your goal is to love God, then love God. That means you spend time in His Word. That means that you spend time in prayer. And I love the fact that you come here to church, because I think that's one of the important things as well. But listen, if this is all you do, you really haven't done enough. Can you imagine in a marriage relationship just showing up once a week and saying, hey, I'm home. Look at all you get. You know, they'd be like, okay. You know, it's about spending time with them. And I tell you this, spending time with God is this great thing, because He's given us the ability to communicate with Him, and we need to tell Him what's going on in our life. Matter of fact, when I try to live by this thing, it says that, and we'll get into this in a little bit too, but it's the idea of praying without ceasing. You see, there are times when I'm going through life that I just have a conversation with God. Why? Because I want Him part of my life. And so there'll be times that stupid things happen. The fact that I was sore the other day and I'm turning 50, I'm like, Lord, you know how this insane is that I'm underneath this sink right now at 50-year-old trying to do this stuff. And by the time I put all my time and energy into it, I was like, I think it would have been cheaper to get a plumber, you know? And Lord me, he'd probably laugh like, yeah, you're an idiot, you know, but hey, I love you, you know? But there are times too when I'm going through difficult situations where I got to stop what I'm doing and say, Lord, I don't know how to handle this situation. I need you to come in and speak to me. So it's that ability to show God that I love Him by talking to Him and spending time listening as well. But even if your goal in life is to do well at your work, then do well at your work. Like, make sure you show up. Make sure you're adding to the day. Don't spend all your time on social media and stuff. Like, make sure that you get your job done. And honestly, like, some of you will even have goals to say, like, this is where I want to be at in retirement. Then push for those things. I want to tell you this. When you have a goal is so nice because it actually gives you permission of what you can say yes to and what you have to say no to. And so there are certain things, if I said that I love my kids, like, I cannot do. There's meetings I cannot attend because I need to make sure that my kids know I love them and I need to show up. If I'm trying to save certain monies from retirement, there are certain things that I cannot buy. There are certain things that I cannot do because I'm saying at the end of the day, this is my goal. Like, I don't want to be working until, 50 times 2, like, I don't want to be out there, So we have the goal in mind. So there's some things I cannot do right now because this is what I'm trying to save for. So it allows us and it gives us permission. And there are certain things that when I come into a relationship with God that I say, there are things that I can do and there are things that I cannot do because I'm staying true to the Word of God. So we get into verse 13 then, and this is what begins to happen with God and Moses. It says, and this is God talking to Moses again. He says, after you have seen it, talking about the promised land, you too will be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was. You know what he just told him there? He says, you're going to die. He said, you've seen the promised land. Now I want you to understand, you have brought the people to it. You're not getting into it. And you're going to die. And so verse 14 says, for when the community rebelled at the waters in the desert of Zin, both of you disobeyed, talking about Moses and Aaron, both of you disobeyed my command to honor me as holy before their eyes. These were the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin. And here's what I want you to understand about a leader. A leader knows when his or her time is coming to an end. And this was an easy one because God said, you're going to die. You're not getting there. So this is it for you. And this whole kind of crazy thing is, I think that we need to do a little bit of looking back. Because the question is, well, this stinks for Moses. Moses put up with all their complaining. He put up with all this stuff. He's going before God. He's taken the journey. He's all the way there and cannot enter it. Like, how is that fair? And he already gives them the reason. He reminds me, he says, Moses, and you have to remember, the reason why you're not getting in is because of what happened in the desert of Zin. And so if you go back to Numbers 20, here's the story you're going to read. The story says that the people were complaining and they were grumbling, and Moses and Aaron had enough again. They said, we've got no water out here. And so Moses and Aaron says they fall prostrate before the Lord. In other words, there was deep grieving and there was deep concern. And they said, the people are complaining. They want water again. And God tells Moses this. He says, I want you to go to the rock and I want you to speak to it and water will come out. That was the command. Now I want to take you back into Exodus as well. In Exodus, we read about a rock as well. And the people cried out for water. And God told Moses to strike the rock with his staff and water will come out. And that, in fact, happened. So now we're given a second time where they're coming to this rock. And Moses gets out there, and all of a sudden, you can kind of feel this anger within him. And he's upset. And who's he upset with? He's upset with the people. He's like, I'm just tired. We're almost at the end of the 40-year period, and you're still complaining about the same stupid things. And then he says this, you rebellious people. You people who will not be obedient to God. You people who have not listened to him. Like, you keep messing up over and over again, and you don't trust him. And so then it says that he strikes the rock again, and then water flows from it. And it says in that moment, God is upset with him. So why is God upset with him? I have to tell you, scholars actually are all over the place on this kind of one thing. And some of the things that they say, because they have different kind of theories and stuff. And the main theory is this. You have to remember the main theory of this whole book is what? Is one of obedience. This is what God says. This is what we do. Now, you have to understand, when you're placed into a place of leadership, you are held to a higher standard. Remember what Moses was upset with him about? You rebellious people. You continue to be disobedient. God told him to only speak to the rock. Don't strike it, just speak to him. And in that moment, and in his rage and his anger with the people, he struck the rock and disobeyed God. And God says, because of that, neither you or Aaron will get in. Now, there's other things about this as well. And one of the things is because some people say that Moses took things in his own actions and then he set himself up almost to be the God instead. Another theory is that, and you have to follow me on this one. Moses used the staff to strike the rock. Moses used the staff that turned into a snake. Moses used the staff that parted the Red Sea. So when Moses dies, what do people think about that staff? They may think there's power in that staff. And so that could become an idol for them as well. That's another theory. The last one is this, which has some great implications in what we call Christology, in the study of Christ. And that's this, and we read about it in Corinthians as well. But when Moses struck the rock the first time, water flowed from it, and that became the water that helped them have life. all right, he was not asked to strike it again. And this helps with the Christology understanding about Jesus. Jesus was only struck down once, and out of him came living water. And once Christ was struck down once, he will not be struck down again. And this was part of the bigger story. And I said, just like first service, that gives me chills to think about what God was doing way back then to show Christ even to us today. So here's the second thing I realized even in those verses right there. The second thing I understand is that, am I on the right page? Sorry, I may have missed something here. All right, so what I understand about this is that, so Moses, if I were him, I would have been really angry with the people. Because listen, the whole reason he doesn't get in is because they were complaining. And it feels like they pushed him to the point that he tried to respond and react the way he did. And if I was him, I would have been like, you people are the reason I'm not getting in. But this is what I love, because Moses could have easily sabotaged the group, could have been uncaring about the group. But I want you to watch now his response. We get into verses 15 and 17. It says, Moses said to the Lord, may the Lord, the God who gives breath to all living things, appoint someone over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. Do you hear that grace and that tone in his voice right then? Instead of being upset, instead of saying, I'm going to sabotage you, he has this grace that says, I want to leave you with good leadership. And I have to tell you, like I said before, it's very easy for pastors or for people who their time has come to an end and they're upset with the way things are going. It's very easy for somebody to sabotage something so that they can look even better. But yet Moses' response was what? To care for the people, to offer grace for the people, and to continue to love the people. I mean, that's a powerful thing right there. And Moses chose this. As a leader, the leader knows the importance of prayer. Moses understood that I cannot do this on my own. I do not know who to ask to be in charge, but I know that if I pray, if I communicate with God, God will continue to speak, and he will allow me to see who this next leader should be. And there is an importance, by the way, when you and I have transitional times, that you and I need to spend time with the Lord in prayer. We need to be praying for our kids who will come behind us. We need to be praying for our spouses. We need to be praying for our coworkers. We need to be praying for our kids' spouses. We need to be praying for our next pastor here at this church. Like, we need God to start raising that person now. So when that my time comes in, when one of our other pastors' time comes to an end, somebody God has been preparing will be there to continue to move this church forward. The other thing about that passage that I thought was interesting is that as a leader knows the importance of carrying on after they are gone. And I really think this church is a great example of how certain leaders did certain things and didn't get to see the end result. So, for example, one of the guys that I am most, I think it's because it was when I was a kid. I grew up in this church since I was 3. And we used to be on Bennett Street. And we brought a pastor in by the name of Pastor Freely. And what he did is he said, we need to move the location. And we need to build a new church because we want to see more and more people come to Jesus. And so he built sort of that first L shape out there. And then God blessed him. And with his great leadership, he was able, listen, he spent time in prayer. He spent time researching. He got us out here before a lot of stuff was built around here. He got us to land at a great price. He built the building. Then later we were blessed with a fellowship hall. And then later we were blessed with a gym. He got to see all that stuff happen, believing that God would eventually fill this place. but he never saw it filled with all the people that God had placed in his heart. He saw great growth because we went from 40 when he was here to over 200. But I still think there was a bigger picture. You know why I know there was a bigger picture? Because he had it laid out where the main sanctuary should go even later, because he believed that God was going to fill that up. Then we had a guy by the name of Pastor Beers who came in, and he taught us about how we need to change our worship and be more for the community. And he taught us how to do dramas that were about reaching out. And he got the privilege of actually helping build this sanctuary here. He was here 2 weeks ago, and he was like, I cannot believe how many people are in these seats. He got to help build this, but he never got to see it filled. And then you even had a pastor like Pastor Dave who came in, and he taught us to reach out to the community. He says, I want to do things differently. Like, I'm near retirement and I want to do it the right way. And he says, I want to make sure we're out there in the community. And he began again to do this great work. You know, again, somebody else that was in the stepping stone. Why? Because they were preparing it and they were being faithful to God. And then God allowed us to continue to do the work and ministry here. And church, here's what I want us to know. There are going to be some things that God is going to call us to do that we may never, ever see the end result. But as long as we stay faithful to him, the next generation will benefit from the things that we continue to do with the help of God. And I think we should even think about that in our own lives, of how we're going to pass on leadership to our kids and to those who come after us. And so in verse 18, the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun, a man who is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hand on him. Here's what I understand. A leader knows the potential of leadership in others. In other words, like, you know, for us, it seems like a no-brainer. But Joshua was one of the spies, and he was one of the only two that said, I think we can do this. So already it says that he believed in the power of God, and he was willing to move forward. And God said, because of this, we're going to bless you. And I want you to understand that you and I need to find those leaders around us. And we need to start equipping them and empowering them. In other words, we need to recognize the potential leadership. And here's what I want you to know. Whether you like it or not, you're all going to be in a position of leadership. If you're a parent, you're in a position of leadership. If you have a job and you work with other workers, you have a position of leadership. Like, you have the ability to lead, and God has given every one of you a gift. The problem is how we weigh those gifts sometimes. You know, what we tend to do is we tend to put the emphasis of the gift on those who teach and on those who sing. But man, there is the gift of encouragement. There is the gift of works. There's the gift of those that are doing things behind the scenes. I think there's a gift of being a parent. And I have to tell you, the work that you do, I actually believe is more important than the work that I do. Because you're right there in the midst of it. You're having a direct effect on the people around you. And that is powerful when you think that. And you and I need to start recognizing that next wave of leadership and begin pouring into them. So then you get into verses 19 through 21, and it says, have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly, and commission him in their presence. Give him some of your authority, so the whole Israelite community will obey him. He is to stand before Eleazar the priest, who will obtain decisions for him by inquiring of Urim before the Lord. At his command, he and the entire community of the Israelites will go out, and at his command, they will come in. And so a leader knows how to empower other leaders. And God told him, he says, look, Moses, you're going to put Joshua in charge, but I need to relinquish some of the things you do, and I need to allow you to let him do those things. You know, it's funny, even as a parent, like, one of the things that I enjoy doing is mowing. I figure it's my quiet time, honestly. But all of a sudden, like, as my kids get older, they're like, hey, can I mow? And I'm like, I don't know, man. You know, you may not do this right, or, you know, or you might wreck the mower and stuff. But you know what? When I allow them to mow, guess what it does for them? It empowers them. It makes them feel older. It makes them feel like they have responsibility. And then you know what? I get to just enjoy the day sometimes. And it's kind of nice. But it's kind of hard to turn over that power sometimes. And I've seen it in pastors over and over again when they have to relinquish some of their control and some of their power. That sometimes they can't handle it as well. Others do a great job, but others can't. And so I think it leads to what we say the last thing, but we need to empower those and let those people begin to do stuff. And then the last one, Moses, in verse 22, Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole assembly. Then he laid his hands on him and commissioned him as the Lord instructed through Moses. And so this is what I know. A leader knows how to finish well. Moses says, this is what I need to do. Let me set up this because I still care about the people. You see, church, there are things that you should be doing to set up your family to finish well. There are things that you should be doing in the church to help us set it up well. And here's what I want to give you. I want to give you the bigger picture in this. If you just give me a little time, we're going to go into a time of communion as well. There is a bigger picture happening Christology-wise again. Moses, to some degree, is becoming an expression of Jesus himself. And listen to this. Moses leads the people. He empowers the people. He shows the people. And he teaches them to see what it's like to be obedient to God. He leads them out of slavery and leads them to the promised land. And now they have the opportunity to go get it because of what he's done. Jesus Christ came and taught us how to live. And he empowered his disciples so that they could continue on the ministry. And he brought them all the way to the promised land. And he said, look, I'm going to die on a cross. And this is going to be your way to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now go get it. And be obedient. And church, you and I have been given that grace because of what Jesus did on the cross so long ago.
Thanks again for listening. If you are located in the Marion area, we would love to have you join us at one of our Sunday morning gatherings. For directions, service times, and information about our fantastic children and student ministries, please visit us at dayspringwesleyan.org. That's dayspringwesleyan.org.